Great googly moogly, we're back again for reasons unknown to me. It is the very first Happy April Fools. The 1st of April, 2019. It's about 1:45 in the afternoon. For whatever ridiculous reason, again, you are watching me, again, rant. Whatever. Anyway. Please, on the social media end, make sure you are following whatever field you go to for airsoft or paintball or whatever you do. Make sure you're following their social media. Make sure you're interacting with them. That'll help them be a better field, hopefully. If you are in the Northern California area, please check out US Airsoft in Anderson, Uka's in Galt, CQB City in Stockton, West Coast Adventure Park in Slough House, and the Airsoft Ministry in Roseville, California. So, Airsoft is a training tool. I find it a very interesting piece for two reasons. Well, really for one reason. You're looking at like niche level stuff. So, not only in the professional training world, law enforcement, military aspects, or EP security, whatever you're using it for, first you have to understand how to train those individuals, which is like its own art form. Then you have to understand how to incorporate the airsoft piece into it to reinforce that training. I was using it. We were using it at work for years. It's at work is actually what got me into airsoft. Maybe I would have gotten to it again at some point, I don't know, but that was my first airsoft experience. It was because we were using it for training at work. So this is sort of geared towards any trainer, FTOs, training officers, firearms instructors, things like that, and anyone else, any casual listener can just kind of follow along for the ride. If you are not familiar with me, so I'm going to start this video off assuming that you're in the professional world, not in the airsoft world, so you're trying to figure out who I am and my background. So I was a police officer with the Defense Logistics Agency out of Tracy, California. I was a federal uniformed police officer under the Department of Defense. And I was California Post certified in active shooter response tactics through National Training Concepts. That guy is based out of SoCal. I went through it was a 32-hour instructor course. I went through it in 2012, I think, and Tracy PD hosted it. Dude, that guy's a whiz. If you're looking for an active shooter response instructor course to go through, see if he's still doing it with National Training Concepts. He's based out of SoCal. That guy's legit. I think he's one of the only private post contractors still out there. Like he's his own thing. So I can't remember what his name is, but he's not agency affiliated. But he is post certified, which is super important. So moving on. When you're picking, as again, talking to like agency guys, one of the key aspects you really need to focus on is the gear you're using for your training. Don't go cheap. We went cheap. We bought a brand called KJW. We bought their M9s, and we had so many malfunctions. Here's the problem you're going to run into if you haven't already figured it out as a trainer in other aspects. If your training equipment is faulty, you already understand you've lost your student's mindset. They're done. They've checked out, and now they're just going through the motions, and that is very toxic, and that's very poisonous if you're a trainer. Once one student is kind of like, screw this, dude, that's going to carry out throughout breaks. He's going to tell his friends why he doesn't care about the training. That plague will spread throughout your students, and that's something you can control. You're really going to want to dig deep and look into good quality equipment. Here's the other interesting piece from the law enforcement world that you're probably not going to be used to is airsoft companies do not have certified armorers courses. They don't. For instance, now talking to my airsoft kids, if you say you were a cop and your police department used Glocks, you can go to Glock, and Glock will teach your cops, your officers, usually your designated armorers, how to fix those guns. Airsoft world, that doesn't exist. Usually kids learn from doing. You just go on YouTube, you figure out, you watch text, you take it to a shop or whatever. But speaking to the law enforcement world, I have not seen a company, and I'm waiting to see who does this, because I think the first company that does this will really start to dominate the agency market. No company that I am currently aware of offers a armorer's course or an airsoft equivalent of an armorer's course. So in the airsoft world, an armorer is called a tech. That doesn't exist. So when you're picking agency training airsoft guns, make sure you're handling that piece also. So whatever company you're getting from, see if you can get like a maintenance or service package for that. So as far as using the equipment itself, what's great about airsoft is it is a valid way to reinforce tactics and to reinforce kind of everything you're doing that you would do live fire. Now you're just doing it non-live. So it's almost that step between like dry fire and live fire. It's kind of in the middle of that. We're not really dry firing, we're not really live firing either, but there is still some pieces to it. There is in the professional world, we all know what simunitions are. Everyone knows what simunitions are, and if you're not aware of it, in my airsoft kids, it's basically paint rounds. So you can take like a regular real steel gun, replace the slide and a couple other parts here and there, and it'll fire small paint rounds. But the professional world, we understand that it's like basically $1 a round, if not more. Last time I checked, like it was somewhere around $50 for 50 rounds, somewhere in there, before the conversion slides and this, that, and the other, and the blah, blah, blah. It's nuts. It's crazy pricey. So now smaller agencies are going to airsoft because of budget cuts. But no one is really telling people, like, hey, this is what you need to do. They're just sort of giving airsoft guns to their real steel instructors or their firearms instructors, and they're like, all right, here, figure this out. I'm like, okay, I guess we're just going to sort of do the same thing. Hang on. If you're using it for just firearms manipulation, it's almost somewhat of a seamless transition in the sense that you're still able to do the same equipment specific. Most of the equipment is tailored to be as realistic as possible. So you can still go through your physical manipulations. You can still do your reloads. You still do your malfunctions drills, or at least like doing them dry. It's kind of hard to set up a real steel malfunction in an airsoft gun. You can still stovepipe. You just, put your casing in there, just like how you'd clear a stovepipe or a double feed or anything like that. You could still do your immediate actions and things like that if you kind of understand how to incorporate that. It's pretty seamless. Obviously, the marksmanship is not going to be the same for what should be obvious reasons. But your physical manipulations, your cognitive abilities can still be there. You can still do a lot with that airsoft training. If we're looking into force, now the force aspect is where it really becomes like black belt mastery level of how to incorporate it. One of the things you really need to look at is what is the effective range of the gun you've got. Some of those guns will shoot just fine, and you can usually, if we're inside of if we're doing like close quarter stuff, usually you're pretty good. But I've seen guys like try and do long haul shots with pistols, and because they don't understand the hop up, because they bought BBs that were too light, they're lining up sight picture sign alignment just fine, and then as soon as they pull the trigger, they see the projectile go straight and drift up and arc out because they're not quite understanding the trajectory aspect of it. So I would recommend for pistols using at least 0.25 or 0.28 ammunition for pistols, depending on what you're using. Some guys are mostly a lot of pistol users. If it's just regular green gas, they're using .25s. What that means is a quarter of a gram. So with that .2 or point whatever, they're talking about the decimal percentage of a gram. So a .25 BB is a quarter of a gram in decimal format. Fun fact. The other aspect you're going to want to get away from is have your guys gear down. When we would do active shooter response training, our guys wanted to wear their vests. Part of the nice thing about airsoft training is you get that pain response. You start to get that, like, you can go on any field and see what I'm talking about. Like, the way that guys are moving dry is not the same way they're going to move when they're taking little BBs to the face and the arm. Don't let guys wear their duty vests. Some people will say, and I had officers say that, oh, I want to wear my tack vest because that's how I train as if I blah, 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 blah. What they're really saying is, I'm afraid of pain and I want to wear this vest so I don't get boo-boos. That, you got to get rid of that. Because already that's a chicken-ass mindset. I'm trying not to swear. That's a coward's mindset. If they want to wear additional protective gear to mitigate the pain response, that's a coward's mindset. And that's something that at some point I'm sure an instructor will address. But I recommend short sleeve uniforms. So most agencies have a BDU style uniform. I would recommend that. I'm not a huge fan of doing like the Class B style uniform for training, only because guys spend a lot of money in keeping those things clean and neat and nifty. So whatever minimalist training uniform you can come up with is what I would recommend. In your risk assessment, one of the things that you're going to need to address is in that risk assessment, I'm willing to bet, because I had to address it, is a minimum safety engagement. Meaning, can an officer go up and point blank a suspect? There's a policy thing, but what your safety officer is going to look at is, oh, that's too close and people might break the skin and blah blah blah. So you need to understand that when your safety office or whatever administrator wants a minimum engagement distance, you need to understand what you're telling your officers is that you're training them cognitively to be 5 feet away before they pull the trigger. You need to understand that is a training scar. So just like how we have training scars on a flat range, on a live fire range, you can also get them from using airsoft for force training. That's very dangerous, and that usually once explained or once kind of justified or things like that, usually most safety officers go, oh, really? Oh, zero. Oh, there are fields that have zero minimum engagement for pistols. Oh, really? Oh, 12-year-olds do that. Huh. Okay, that's fine. Another aspect you're going to need to look at is, are you going to use full face masks or just eye protection? Obviously, the advantage of the full face mask is the safety aspect, but when officers are wearing a mask, unless you're using it to reinforce loud verbal communications, they're not going to be able to talk to each other, and you're not going to hear them over the radio because that mask is going to muffle their voice. That's why I'm not a huge fan of using a full face mask for training. You can either use just straight up eye pro, just like how you would use on the range. We wear eye pro on the range all the time. Or do like a lower face mesh. But for force training, I do not recommend you use a full face mask because it will inhibit your verbal communications. Again, unless you have like an officer with like a low, that doesn't use their big boy or big girl voice very well, and you're trying to use that muffled mask to encourage them to speak up, that's fine. As long as you understand the two, that's, I think that's groovy good to go. Geez, what else? I think that's the biggest pieces of it. If you're looking for OPT4 to use, like you're looking for suspects, obviously it's going to be agency, blah, 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 blah. I'm not a huge fan necessarily of using officers, because what will happen is they won't take it seriously. So you need to find... Oop, laptop froze. I recommend, if you have the resources available, find an outside source to use as a suspect. Go to an airsoft field. Just find a third party outside of your agency and tell them, hey, do you want to shoot a bunch of cops with airsoft guns? Go to your community outreach center. Go to like the recruitment department and say, hey, put it out on social media. Hey, if you want to shoot at cops with an airsoft gun, show up here. Fill this form out, and here you go. See what you can do against them. Could be a good community piece to use. Could encourage a dialogue. Could help let the non-law enforcement community see, or the private sector community see, like, how the officers are training. I don't believe in this antiquated, these are secret, we can't have them see how we train, blah, blah. That's done. You can see what every agency is learning on YouTube. We're all learning the same stuff. No one's really coming out with any new top secret tactics, because structures haven't really changed, people haven't really changed, so the fundamentals are still there. So I'm really not I don't buy into this. We don't want the private citizens like seeing how we train, blah blah, like that. Get out of that. You either know what you're doing or you don't. That's it. You're the champ. The champion is always the champion under any circumstance. You either are or you're not. That was always my mindset. There was a shop in Tracy called Black Ops Airsoft. We used some of their employees that volunteered, and what we did in turn, we didn't pay them. We were already using them as vendors, like for our gear and our stuff. And then what we were giving them was like big certificates of achievements, and we'd like take pictures with us and their guys and stuff. We'd give them promotional value. We'd give them pictures and certificates and, all that stuff. That's how we rewarded them. Other than obviously they were our vendors for our gear and they fix all of our stuff. That's really about it. Everything else with airsoft training is sort of similar to what you have already figured out from training anyway. If you're an FTO, you know what I'm talking about. If you're a baton instructor, taser instructor, like everything else is still the same. You're still going to have that one guy that tries to sharpshoot sniper everything. You're still going to have the guys that think they know what they're doing and they suck. You're still going to have the guys that suck and then actually end up being really good. But it's no different than any other aspect of training. It's just, what are the specific particulars of the subject? Really, as long as you understand the equipment and how it works, and how to integrate that, you're fine. The nice thing about airsoft is you could basically train that anywhere. So if you have a training room, which was what we were using, there's your range. Oh, if this guy's having low range scores and you don't have the funds to give him practice live ammunition, cool, bring him in the training office and we can at least go over dry drills. We can go over some fundamentals. We can work on his trigger squeeze and his presentation, and we can work on everything except the actual bang. Now, if you're a firearms instructor, you already understand that you don't need live ammunition to make a shooter better. It helps, but it's not necessarily needed. Up until a certain point, obviously. You understand quality dry drills, you understand cognitive functions and behavioral adult learning concepts and blah, 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 all that other stuff they crammed in us in all the various instructor schools we all went to. That's really it. That's all I can think of for a quick rant on that. Yeah, that's it. If you got anything, let me know. Bye. And stop recording.